Welcome to today's Explainer. We are diving headfirst into a truly profound philosophical exploration today. We're going to be examining some fascinating source material that basically attempts to map out the very nature of the cosmos, the architecture of human consciousness, and the undeniable link between the two. You know, if you've ever looked up at the night sky and wondered about your place in the vastness of space, or maybe looked inward and wondered about the true depth of your own thoughts, well, the text we're analyzing today offers a very specific, spiritually grounded framework for understanding both.
So let's just jump right in by starting with what is arguably the ultimate human question. What happens to the mind when the body perishes? For literally millennia, humanity has wrestled with what happens after physical death. And our source material, it tackles this head-on. It establishes its foundational premise right from the prologue, asking us to just momentarily set aside purely physical, biological limits and really consider a completely different paradigm for human existence.
Okay, moving into Section 1, the immortal inner mind, beyond physical death. The text explicitly argues that human existence is absolutely not bound by biology alone. It posits that the mind actually survives the destruction of the physical body. So according to this philosophy, the mind isn't just some byproduct of brain chemistry, right? It's an enduring entity. Even after the physical vessel is completely gone, this inner mind continues to emit thoughts, it retains its unique memories, and it totally holds on to its distinct personality.
The original text actually challenges the conventional medical view right out of the gate to set up its cosmic premise. While modern medicine largely views the mind simply as a function of the brain, the text firmly counters this. It states that long-term spiritual research reveals a reality where the mind operates entirely independently of flesh and bone, which really sets the stage for a massive question. If the mind is immortal and boundless, where exactly does it reside, and what in the world is its relationship to the universe?
That brings us to Section 2, a water drop in the cosmos, the macrocosm.
Now, to transition from this invisible inner mind to the vast external universe, we first need to define a central theological concept from the text, and that is the primordial Buddha, or the foundational divine consciousness. The source explains that the physical, three-dimensional reality we experience every day, it isn't just a random accident. Instead, it was materialized, literally brought into physical form by the thoughts and intentions of this primordial consciousness. So the universe, in this view, is essentially a physical manifestation of a single divine thought.
And I think this brilliantly illustrates the contrast between looking at the universe through a physical telescope versus a spiritual lens. The text points out that, sure, modern astrophysics explains the origins of the universe through theories like the Big Bang and cosmic inflation, but it argues those scientific explanations really only capture a fraction of the truth. Astrophysics observes the mechanics, right? But this spiritual cosmology suggests that behind that Big Bang is an eternal, infinite, divine will that has existed forever, spanning boundless pasts and limitless futures. To help us wrap our heads around this massive scale, the text offers this striking, almost cinematic analogy. It says the three-dimensional universe is like a small water globe floating in a zero-gravity spaceship. Just imagine that for a second. Everything we know, literally, every galaxy, every star, every planet, is just a tiny, self-contained droplet of water suspended in a much vaster, unseen reality.
And inside that tiny cosmic water drop, the text describes us, humans, as invisible microorganisms. It's an incredibly humbling and honestly kind of funny perspective when you think about it. The author notes the irony that we microscopic beings often mistakenly believe we possess godlike intellect. We analyze the walls of our little water drop and think we've figured out the whole shebang, the entirety of existence. We observe our physical boundaries and completely forget the infinite space holding the drop itself.
Let's zoom back in for Section 3, exploring the inner universe, the microcosm.
But don't worry, the text doesn't leave us feeling totally insignificant. It pivots beautifully here, zooming all the way back into the human mind. The crucial point is that true exploration isn't just about building better telescopes to look outward. It's about looking infinitely inward. The text asserts that every single living being contains a universe within themselves. How? Well, because humans possess fragments of that original divine light. The deepest part of your mind is directly connected to the infinite macrocosm we were just talking about.
Moving on to Section 4, love and selflessness, methods of exploration.
So this brings up a highly practical question. How exactly do we explore this inner universe? The text doesn't just leave us with abstract theory. It provides a really actionable step-by-step framework. Step 1 is practicing the principle of love. Step 2 is practicing selflessness, which is rooted in the Buddhist concept of anatman, or non-attachment. And then step 3 is using these practices to ultimately enter the profound depths of the divine mind. It is super vital to understand that here, love is framed not merely as some fleeting emotion, but as a highly practical, active tool. The author explains that love is literally the mechanism by which we remove the artificial walls and barriers separating ourself from others. It's basically the first technique used to break down the ego.
The text commands, and I quote, "By the principle of love, let us transcend the barriers between self and others, becoming one with others." When applied to daily life, practicing this non-attachment to our own rigid ego completely transforms our worldview. By acting selflessly, we stop seeing ourselves in isolated competition with the world, and instead, we realize our interconnectedness. We pierce right through the illusion of separation.
Which leads us to Section 5, the highest happiness, attaining true enlightenment.
So what actually happens when those walls finally fall? This brings us to the real climax of the text's philosophical journey. The ultimate goal of all these practices is to attain true enlightenment. And the text describes this state not as some empty void, but as the highest, most profound happiness possible. It is an enduring, eternal joy found by seamlessly uniting your inner self with the boundless cosmos. The source emphasizes that compared to this deep cosmic unity, all worldly glory and temporary successes just completely fade away. And it all culminates in this incredible metaphysical paradox. You are the universe, and the universe is you. I mean, let the weight of that sink in for a moment. By looking deeply inward and dissolving the ego, you don't find nothingness, you find absolutely everything. The tiny microcosm of the human mind expands to seamlessly match the infinite macrocosm. In fact, the text definitively erases the line between the internal mind and the external universe. It declares that at the moment of highest happiness, you and the universe are entirely one entity. It is the ultimate synthesis of the text message. It's the moment the tiny water drop realizes it is made of the exact same essence as the vast ocean outside of it. We've journeyed from the survival of the individual mind out to the cosmic water drop, and then all the way back inward to discover a universe within ourselves. The source material presents a reality where true enlightenment is an inward journey of love and selflessness that ultimately unlocks the stars. So I will leave you with this. If an infinite universe truly resides entirely within your own mind, what will you choose to explore today? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning, keep learning, and keep exploring.
Welcome back to a brand new explainer. Today we're going on a seriously mind-bending journey through some source material that literally takes us from the roots of human history all the way into deep space. We're unpacking a text that weaves together global history, theology, and, well, a concept that is way bigger than our own planet. Buckle up, because the scale of these ideas expands really, really fast. We're starting right here on Earth and accelerating straight into a completely cosmic paradigm. Let's get right into it.
So what exactly connects ancient world religions to the upcoming space age? I know, it sounds like the setup to a sci-fi movie, right? Usually when we talk about ancient theology, we're looking backward. And when we talk about the space age, we're looking forward. But the material we're looking at today makes this massive, honestly, breathtaking leap that ties these two things together. The author basically says that understanding our spiritual past is the absolute prerequisite for our cosmic future. Let's trace how they bridge that gap.
Okay, let's dive into this. The author actually grounds us in a very specific time and place before making that giant cosmic jump. Chapter 1 opens by addressing a very modern hurdle: Japan's current prejudice against religion. You know, in contemporary Japanese society, secularism isn't just common, it's practically the default. The text points out that if folks from more religiously active countries fully grasped this level of secularism, they'd be pretty shocked. And the author argues this cultural prejudice is a huge barrier, preventing deeper spiritual exploration.
But from that observation, the author makes a really bold claim about national destiny. Quote, Japan has a responsibility as a nation that transmits new teachings. So despite being this highly secular modern state right now, the text argues Japan is actually destined to be a spiritual broadcasting station for the world. Transmitting these teachings isn't just some cultural export. It's framed as a binding duty to humanity, a responsibility to help the whole globe shift its understanding of existence.
Section 1, the single golden path, finding the common thread. To understand what these new teachings are, we've got to zoom out to the macro level of global history. The author argues that humanity has gone through an insane amount of trial and error.
We've built all these distinct, diverse civilizations and religions, but here's the tragic recurring theme the text points out. When we get hung up on the superficial differences between these groups, it almost always leads to devastating religious conflict. The core message? It is absolutely crucial to find what the author calls the single golden path running through all of them. Instead of obsessing over variations in rituals, we need to dig deeper and find the shared truth underpinning the whole human spiritual experience.
Section 2. Defining right faith, the crucial belief. So, how do we actually walk this single golden path? Well, the author introduces a non-negotiable foundation called right faith. According to the text, right faith is the definitive belief in the existence of the afterlife, the spirit world, and the idea that human beings are fundamentally souls. And what's really fascinating here is that the author isn't just presenting this as some abstract philosophy. The text claims to have provided tangible proof of this reality, citing hundreds of public spiritual messages meant to demonstrate that life seamlessly continues after death. The author emphasizes you absolutely have to stand on the side of this right faith. And the text is super firm about why this matters. Think about everything we try to accumulate in this life, right? Wealth, status, a nice house, degrees. The source strips all of that away, stating unequivocally that the only thing you can take back to the next world is right faith. It's a huge contrast between temporary earthly stuff and eternal spiritual understanding. Basically, right faith is your essential luggage for the soul's journey, and everything else, you literally have to leave it behind at the door. Section 3. The Cosmic Paradigm Shift, Awakening as New Earthlings.
Now here is where we reach the climax of the argument, and honestly, it's a monumental pivot. Everything we just talked about, world religions, ending earthly conflicts, the afterlife, the author frames those not as the end goals, but as step one. They're just prerequisites. The text states, interaction with people of the universe, the Space Brothers, will soon begin. The logic is that proving the afterlife is actually the fundamental requirement for meeting extraterrestrials. Think about it. If we can't even comprehend our own spiritual existence or get along with each other on Earth, how on earth are we going to interact with highly advanced cosmic civilizations? As the space age approaches, understanding our spirituality becomes a matter of literal cosmic diplomacy. Because of this approaching era, the text argues we have to fundamentally shift our paradigm and awaken as new earthlings. And the author uses a brilliant metaphor for the old earthling mindset. It's like living trapped inside a tiny water globe, or a soap bubble, totally confined by earthly common sense. In that bubble, we think we're alone in the center of everything. But to break out, we need the new earthling mindset. This means waking up to the realities of the spirit world, accepting what we might call miracles, and fully acknowledging space people. We have to shatter that water globe to see the wider universe. And this perfectly illustrates the author's urgent call to action. Humanity has got to break away from the heavy gravity of past common sense and face this entirely new reality. It's not just a fun thought experiment. It's framed as a matter of future survival. And this brings all our threads together. This is why Japan needs to broadcast these new teachings, why we have to find that golden path to end religious conflict, and why right faith is so essential. It's all prep work for the moment humanity steps into a much, much wider cosmic community. If we don't break our old common sense, we just won't be ready. Which leaves us with one final profound question to wrestle with. If humanity actually adopted this massive cosmic new earthling perspective, how would it completely alter the way we view our current worldly conflicts? If we zoom out far enough to recognize a shared spiritual path and find ourselves in a universe filled with advanced space brothers, do our earthly fights over territory or dogma still matter at all? Viewing things on a cosmic scale really has a way of making our divisions look incredibly small. It's a huge paradigm shift to think about. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. Keep questioning your common sense, keep seeking those big answers, and I'll catch you in the next one.
All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking a genuinely fascinating and highly unique spiritual cosmology from Chapter 2 of our source text. We're going to be looking objectively at a comprehensive framework that tries to explain the supernatural through a very, very specific lens.
So let's just dive right in with a question that kind of challenges our everyday earthly common sense. Are miracles confined to the ancient past, or are they a present reality? You know, most historical texts treat miracles like ancient myths, but the text we're examining today takes a drastically different approach. It argues that miraculous events aren't just possible today, they are measurable, ongoing phenomena happening right now all around us.
In fact, the text makes a really bold claim. Miracles, specifically miraculous healings of severe illnesses, are actively happening today.
According to the author, within a specific religious community known as Happy Science, these events are becoming especially frequent. The source points to a massive surge in their occurrence, and it attributes this directly to rising levels of faith among believers. Basically, the idea is that when collective belief goes up, the chances of what we'd call a miracle completely skyrocket.
To figure out the mechanics behind all these claims, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with miracles in modern times, then explore alien resurrections in history, identify the threat of evil spirits, and wrap up with the power of true faith.
Okay, Section 1. Miracles in modern times. Let's look at how the source frames the occurrence of these present-day events.
The teachings actually outline very specific interventions designed to trigger these healings. A major one is a specialized spiritual prayer ritual called Super Vega healing, and the source gives a really specific modern anecdote to back this up. It claims that a patient suffering from a life-threatening subarachnoid hemorrhage, someone literally hovering on the brink of death, was completely cured and walked out of the hospital the exact same day this prayer was performed. So it's positioned not as a medical fluke, but as a direct result of targeted spiritual intervention.
Moving on to Section 2. Alien resurrections in history. Let's see how these modern miracles build on a pretty unconventional cosmic history.
To understand the present, the text says we have to look back. It draws a direct line from the modern healings we just talked about to some of the most famous resurrections in human history. It creates this continuum from ancient Egypt through the 1st century right up to the modern era. It's basically suggesting the underlying mechanism for all these incredible events is exactly the same. So what is the science behind this? Well, to grasp it, we have to talk about what the source calls interdimensional power. The text defines this as spiritual energy from higher dimensions that can physically intervene here on Earth. And the text is clear, this isn't magic. It's framed more like a higher form of physics from spiritual realms that can alter our physical reality. Think of it like a hidden law of the universe that only clicks into place when it's channeled through genuine, unwavering faith. This brings us to a really fascinating perspective. The text reinterprets ancient mythology through an extraterrestrial lens. Take the ancient Egyptian myth of Osiris, for example, who was famously torn apart and then put back together. The text claims this wasn't just symbolic folklore. Osiris was literally reconstructed and revived. And how? Well, through advanced healing technology brought by visiting extraterrestrials using that exact same Vega healing power invoked in those modern prayers.
Then, the text applies this same framework to a massive cornerstone of Western religion, making the startling assertion that Jesus Christ's resurrection in the 1st century was also facilitated by these extraterrestrial beings. According to the document, after Jesus died and was placed in the tomb, his body was actually drawn up into the air using advanced tractor beams operated by beings from the star system Vega, and that is how the text explains the empty tomb and the resurrection 3 days later.
Now you might be wondering, how does the text justify blending ancient scripture with sci-fi concepts? It all comes down to a specific number, 1,000. The source claims these beings from the Vega star system possess science and technology that is exactly 1,000 years more advanced than our earthly capabilities. To put that into perspective, what primitive humans perceived as divine miracles, like assembling a dismembered body or raising the dead, is literally just advanced medical science to the Vegans.
Okay, Section 3, the threat of evil spirits. Because if there is a cosmic force for healing, the text also introduces a hidden spiritual antagonist causing our earthly suffering. The book outlines a pretty stark spiritual worldview. It argues that severe physical illness isn't just a biological breakdown. It is deeply, deeply intertwined with spiritual attacks. The text introduces the idea that invisible evil spirits and demons actively target people, and that this spiritual interference physically manifests in the human body as severe illness and disease. And get this, the crucial point here is a really specific and radical claim made by the author. A staggering 75% of severe illnesses are actually caused by evil spirits and demonic possession. That is a huge departure from modern medical science, placing the vast majority of severe health crises squarely in the realm of spiritual warfare. Which brings us to Section 4, the power of true faith. If demonic possession is the root of the problem, here is the text's personal solution for accessing interdimensional protection. The source draws a really sharp line between two distinct mindsets. On one hand, you have earthly common sense. The argument is, if you only believe in what you can physically see, you submit completely to the physical rules of this world, which unfortunately leaves you incredibly vulnerable to spiritual attacks. On the other hand, you have steadfast faith. The text claims this type of faith actually allows you to transcend earthly rules. It's the key that unlocks that protective, interdimensional power we talked about earlier.
To keep evil spirits away, the teachings lay out a strict psychological and spiritual defense. They suggest that demons can't just attack randomly. They only strike when a person's negative thoughts, like anger, fear, or despair, align with the demon's frequency. It's kind of like tuning a radio. So the defense strategy is to maintain a pure mind. By holding on to unwavering belief and refusing to give evil spirits an opening, your steadfast faith acts as a literal shield, blocking demonic control and the illnesses they bring.
We're going to wrap up this explainer with a really provocative challenge straight from the author. It asks readers to not just passively believe these concepts, but to actively cultivate genuine faith, repel negative forces, and become living witnesses to these miracles. It leaves us with a fascinating, entirely unified worldview, where the physical and the spiritual are intimately linked. So it leaves us with one final question to ponder. If our physical reality is truly shaped by our spiritual belief, what kind of universe is your mind building right now?
Hey everyone, and welcome to today's explainer. I am super excited to guide you through a really fascinating piece of source material today. We're looking at a deeply philosophical text called The Laws of Eternity, and specifically, we're going to impartially decode its highly intriguing third chapter. It's titled Towards the Age of Spirituality. We're going to break down the author's exact arguments step by step to really grasp the core of this entirely different worldview.
Okay, let's dive into this. I want to start by posing a really provocative question that the author actually places at the very center of their argument. What if a single miracle could collapse everything we know about modern science? It's a heavy thought, right? This question is essentially the hook of the entire text. The author argues that modern science is built on the absolute denial of the miraculous, which means logically, if just one single anomaly is proven true, that entire scientific paradigm completely fractures.
Section 1. The Materialistic Worldview. So, to really understand the author's bold claim here, we first have to look at the conflict they're setting up. The text posits that modern civilization is totally trapped in what it calls mechanistic or materialistic thinking. The author specifically critiques this thing called the human-machine theory, basically the idea that you and I are nothing more than biological cogs in a machine. According to the text, this rigid framework directly hinders what it calls the restoration of spirituality. And that restoration involves actually acknowledging unseen worlds and recognizing divine connections that exist way beyond our physical senses.
If we look directly at this excerpt, right from the source text, we see the author's claim that we are currently undergoing a massive historical shift. The text argues that if you step back and look at the grand flow of history, we're actively moving away from an era dominated purely by knowledge, information, and, machines. Instead, we're transitioning into what the author says should truly be called an age of spirituality. It's basically a call to recognize a fundamental turning point in human history.
Moving on to Section 2, the reality of miracles.
So how exactly does the author attempt to prove this paradigm shift is happening? Well, they establish a very specific logical framework, and it's summarized perfectly in this quote. If even a single miraculous phenomenon is proven, the basis for saying miracles do not exist collapses. The argument here is that you don't need to prove everything all at once. It literally only takes one genuine anomaly, one verified instance of the impossible, to completely break the rules of modern common sense and just shatter that foundation of denial.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly where the text argues that these unseen phenomena are moving from just theories into verifiable realities. The author explains that, initially, they were experiencing spiritual communications all alone, kind of like a private telephone connecting heaven and earth. But as the text points out, this ability is no longer isolated. Disciples and followers are also beginning to experience these connections. And that, in the author's view, proves that the foundation of modern scientific denial is actively crumbling.
Now, the text doesn't just speak in abstract terms. It lists very specific miraculous phenomena that it claims are actively happening right now as proof of this spiritual age. We're talking about instances of intractable, seemingly incurable diseases being miraculously cured. They describe people hearing distinct spirit voices, warm heavenly light just suddenly appearing, and even physical manifestations, like gold dust literally falling from the air. To help readers wrap their heads around this, the text offers a really fascinating analogy. Modern science fully accepts the existence of invisible radio waves flying through the air all around us, right? You can't see them, but your phone works. The author argues that, in that exact same way, we should accept that the invisible thoughts of billions of people are constantly flying around and intersecting in our world. Because we can't see radio waves, we don't deny them, so, the text argues, we have to apply that exact same logic to human thought and spiritual energy. The source material frames these miracles not as random, chaotic magic, but actually as a direct, structured answer to faith. The text uses this great metaphor of knocking on a door. Just as you go knock knock and hear a yes from the other side, the author claims that sincere faith receives a tangible reply from the spiritual realm. And as more people believe, the text states, these magnetic fields of miracles will only increase in frequency.
Section 3. Advanced Spiritual Abilities.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how this natural progression of faith leads into some highly unique concepts. Take, for example, space people readings. Impartially speaking, the text defines this as an advanced spiritual ability that allows an individual to completely transcend conventional time and space to call forth latent memories from a cosmic space age. We can ground this extraordinary concept right here in the actual text. The author claims to use these readings to literally communicate with entities from space, or to uncover if someone currently on Earth has past memories of living in the cosmos. The author notes that while a lot of people claim to channel aliens, true readings involve piecing together actual, verifiable conditions of other stars and past cosmic lives. It's almost described like a physician conducting a physical checkup, but on a cosmic scale. To explain the process, the author uses a really great visual metaphor. They describe these cosmic readings as slowly filling in the pieces of a massive, universal jigsaw puzzle. By continuously bringing forth these fragmented space-age memories and mapping out the relationships between different extraterrestrial histories, the larger picture, the actual story of the universe, slowly begins to reveal itself, piece by piece. Beyond those cosmic readings, the text also outlines several other advanced spiritual abilities that it claims are necessary for practitioners to develop. These include exorcism, which it defines specifically as fighting off demonic forces that target people's vulnerabilities. It also includes faith healing to cure illness and the ability to freely draw down and channel heavenly light to assist others.
Which brings us to Section 4, overturning modern common sense. Having laid out the existence of all these abilities, the text pivots to a really powerful call to action. The author levels a heavy critique against modern philosophy, arguing that it has completely failed to answer our most fundamental questions. Questions like, what is a human being, and what is human nature? Because of this failure, they argue, humanity has fallen into the trap of the human-machine theory, basically operating without a true moral or spiritual compass.
Furthermore, the source argues that modern common sense is actually a manufactured roadblock. The text explicitly points a finger at mass education, claiming it forcefully implants the idea that miracles are simply impossible. This manufactured skepticism, the author argues, creates a powerful societal force that actively works to suppress spiritual belief and literally stop miraculous phenomena from occurring.
And because of this intense societal resistance, the text demands an equally intense response from its readers. This quote is central to the author's mandate. Overturn the common sense of this world with strong conviction. The author isn't just asking for quiet, private belief here. They are demanding an active, passionate push to completely upend the established secular worldview. So, the crucial point is understanding the exact roadmap the text outlines for its followers. It's a three-step process. First, believers must verify spiritual reality for themselves through faith. Second, they must use that strong conviction to overturn worldly common sense. And third, they have to translate that conviction into a passionate drive to carry out world missionary work, spreading this paradigm shift globally. Now, the text is actually very realistic about the uphill battle this entails. It acknowledges that believers, particularly in Japan, are in the minority, and that the dominant, skeptical forces of society are currently vastly superior in number. Because of that, the author urges followers not to be intimidated, but to push back forcefully and demonstrate strong power to prove that believers aren't foolish, but actually hold a higher truth.
And that brings us to a massive question to ponder based on the source material we've covered today. If we accept the author's premise, how does adopting this spiritual paradigm challenge our daily reality? And, going right back to our opening thought, what happens to our collective common sense if even one of these miracles is undeniably true? It's a truly fascinating philosophical challenge laid out by the laws of eternity, and one that completely reframes the way we look at the unseen world. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.
Welcome back to the Explainer, everyone. Today, we are diving into something truly mind-bending. We're going to explore the esoteric concepts presented in Chapter 4 of our source text, titled Awakening to the Space Age. If you love structured deep dives into complex, cosmic paradigms that challenge conventional history and science, well, you are in the exact right place. We're going to rely strictly on the text today to map out a highly unique perspective on the true history of the universe.
So let's just jump right in with a massive question the text throws at us right out of the gate. We're all familiar with ancient folktales, right? But the author challenges us to rethink them completely. Take the famous Japanese folktale, The Tale of the Bamboo Cutter. The source material asks a very direct question. Was Princess Kaguya actually an extraterrestrial visitor? It's a wild, compelling hook that sets the stage for everything we're about to cover.
Section 1. Aliens in Ancient Myths. Reinterpreting History. The text argues that what we call ancient mythology might actually be a literal, historical record of early alien contact. It points to specific evidence in Japanese myths, for example. The text references ancient descriptions of gods interacting with our world using things like heavenly floating bridges, which are described as step-like structures, and heavenly bird boats. The author argues that when you really look at these descriptions of gods flying through the sky in these vessels, they closely mirror what we'd call UFO sightings today. And applying that lens completely flips the script on Princess Kaguya. The tale of an old man finding a glowing 10-centimeter girl inside a bamboo stalk isn't just a fairy tale, according to the author. The text notes that she grew incredibly fast, and eventually, glowing flying carriages, described back then as ox carriages, came down from the moon to take her back. The source text asserts this is literally an account of an extraterrestrial being visiting Earth and then being retrieved by a spaceship. No way, right?
Section 2. The Methodology. Space People Readings.
Now, you might be wondering, how exactly does the author claim to know all these hidden cosmic histories? If mainstream science doesn't support this, where is the information coming from? Well, that leads us to this foundational concept in the text, space people readings. The author describes this as an advanced spiritual method. It's claimed to be a way to literally transcend time and space to recall memories of a cosmic age and communicate directly with extraterrestrial souls. This is the exact mechanism the author uses to justify the highly unorthodox claims in the book.
The text actually breaks down a really precise three-step process for these readings. Step 1. Bypass physical distance. The author claims this happens via space-time tunnels or wormholes, which shortens distances that would normally take light years to cross. Step 2. Access the consciousness of a soul, regardless of where or when they existed. And finally, Step 3. Communicate directly with them to extract the true cosmic history.
There's a quote in the text that hits the nail on the head regarding the philosophy behind Step 2. The author argues that time simply isn't fixed in the spiritual realm. They state that even if someone is physically deceased, their consciousness remains as a living soul. Because of this, the text claims it's entirely possible to question historical or extraterrestrial souls about past events exactly as if those events were happening right now.
Section 3. Rethinking Human and Animal Origins.
Armed with this spiritual methodology, the author takes a pretty huge swing at modern science. The text draws a stark contrast between Darwinian evolution theory, which, is the current mainstream scientific paradigm, and the author's alternative space origin theory. The source material impartially reports its own findings, derived from those spiritual readings, to push back against conventional biology.
So let's break down the author's specific critique. The text explicitly declares that Darwinian evolution is, quote, half wrong. It fundamentally rejects the scientific consensus that life started merely from a mass of contracting proteins that eventually sparked microscopic organisms. Furthermore, it completely rejects the idea of a continuous, single evolutionary tree where microbes eventually evolved into mice and then all the way up to humans purely through Earth-based changes.
Instead, the space people readings suggest a totally different alternative. Reptiles, birds, and mammals didn't just slowly branch off from a single earthly evolutionary tree. Rather, the text argues that various species actually arrived from space at distinct points in the ancient past, integrating into the Earth's ecosystem over time.
And the text gets incredibly specific here. According to the author's readings, many familiar animals actually originated on other planets before they were ever brought here. The text specifically lists deer, rabbits, squirrels, pigs, and, get this, even capybaras, as creatures whose original forms existed in space. The author notes that while they might have changed in size to adapt to Earth's gravity and environment, their core forms were literally extraterrestrial imports.
Section 4. Cosmic Lineages and Universal Truths.
Shifting gears from biological origins to philosophical connections, the text points specifically to two major star systems as having a massive influence on Earth, the Pleiades and Vega. According to the esoteric teachings of happy science highlighted in the text, Earth's civilization and its foundational Buddhist truths are deeply entangled with the teachings brought by beings from these specific cosmic locations. The text categorizes the distinct philosophical flavors brought by these civilizations. The Pleiades aligns heavily with concepts of beauty, love, harmony, and progress. Vega, on the other hand, is credited with bringing much more mystical and esoteric teachings. This includes the incredibly complex Buddhist concept of Ichinen Sanzen, which relates to the mind's profound power to encompass the entire universe. All of these claims, from UFOs and ancient myths to capybaras from space to spiritual teachings from Vega, serve a massive overarching purpose in the text. The author's ultimate goal is for humanity to synthesize these diverse cosmic influences into a unified framework of universal justice, sometimes referred to in the text as space law. The goal is to awaken us as what the text calls new Earthlings, united by universal human truths. So, what's the big takeaway for us today? The text really wants to expand our future possibilities by totally reshaping how we view our past. It asks us to recognize myths as potential factual cosmic records, to understand that human bodies on Earth might actually harbor reincarnated souls from across the galaxy, and to dedicate ourselves to exploring universal cosmic justice. By understanding the diverse civilizations out there, the author believes we unlock humanity's true ultimate potential. Which leaves us with a massive, thought-provoking question to end on. Based on the framework presented in this source text, if our spiritual teachings, our ancient myths, and even our biological roots truly trace back to the stars, what diverse cosmic civilizations are out there right now, just waiting for us to discover them? It's absolutely fascinating to ponder. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep your curiosity focused on the stars. So, if you've ever looked around at all our rapid technological advancement and felt like, I don't know, maybe we're somehow missing a deeper spiritual core, you definitely aren't alone. Today's explainer unpacks a highly provocative text about humanity's spiritual trajectory. It's a framework that literally challenges the very foundation of what we consider to be progress. To kick things off, we really need to ask a heavy question that sits right at the heart of today's source material, and that is, are modern materialistic values actually causing humanity to devolve? Because, we usually equate progress with things like better technology or longer lifespans, but this text asks us to pause and consider if, by focusing strictly on the material world, we are actually sliding backward as a species. Crazy thought, right? Well, this striking question stems directly from Chapter 5 of our source text, which is titled, Now is the Time for Salvation. This chapter acts as a massive wake-up call. It's entirely dedicated to the survival and prosperity of future humanity, outlining a spiritual paradigm shift that the author deems absolutely necessary to prevent a global crisis of values. Okay, Part 1, Time for Salvation, a Spiritual Paradigm. The text anchors its urgent message in a huge milestone, the 30th anniversary of what it calls the Great Enlightenment. But listen, this isn't just some retrospective celebration. It's presented as a crucial catalyst. It's an aggressive reminder for humanity to believe in a sublime existence. Basically, it's a call to recognize a reality and a truth that exists far, far beyond our immediate physical day-to-day world.
Which brings us to Part 2, Danger of Materialism, the Crisis Today.
Here, the author identifies a really stark contrast between cold, modern common sense and the true essence of humanity, what they call the brilliance of the soul. Think about it. What we casually accept today as common sense, the relentless pursuit of wealth, purely scientific reasoning, worldly status, is, according to the text, fundamentally at odds with recognizing our sublime existence. By overly indexing on the physical, the author suggests we're literally starving the very thing that makes us human.
And the author absolutely does not mince words here. Quote, losing the brilliance of the soul is a regression for humanity, end quote. They aren't just saying materialism is a minor distraction. No, they are asserting it is a literal devolution. Like no matter how many scientific breakthroughs we achieve, if we lose that soul-level brilliance, we are actively taking a step backward in our evolution. To impartially illustrate the limits of modern common sense, the text applies the spiritual lens directly to politics. The argument basically goes like this. Without a foundational spiritual truth, massive democracies risk descending into pure confusion, just absorbing millions of unguided opinions. But on the flip side, military dictatorships or one-party systems are equally flawed. Why? Well, because they strip away divine dignity. They wrongly deny that humans are inherently free. So, in this view, neither secular extreme really works.
Moving on to Part 3, Integrating the Past, a Unifying Solution.
To actually overcome this turbulent period, the text argues we have to integrate the contradictions found in past religions and philosophies. The author points out that world religions taught thousands of years ago are struggling to function in modern society. They just haven't been able to fully save the minds of people today. So the goal isn't to just pick one ancient system over another. It's to synthesize their core truths into a cohesive whole for the modern era.
Part 4. The Universal Truth, Uniting a Divided World.
All right, the text lays out a clear three-part roadmap for future prosperity. First up, maintain belief in a sublime existence beyond the physical realm. Second, actively refuse to be swayed by modern materialistic common sense. You literally have to have the courage to push back. And third, integrate past philosophies through a singular, universal truth. By doing this whole shebang, the text argues, humanity can finally transcend differences in race, language, and ideology and truly unite.
Finally, Part 5, Paving the Future, the Ultimate Goal.
The source points out a staggering reality. Earth's population is rapidly expanding toward 10 billion people. 10 billion! Think of it like a giant unmoderated group chat. Without a shared spiritual foundation, the sheer volume of conflicting thoughts, ideologies, and material desires is just a recipe for chaos. The author emphasizes that a population of this scale, if it's relying solely on materialistic common sense, will inevitably lead to systemic collapse.
And this right here reveals the true vastness of the author's vision. We aren't just trying to patch up today's immediate political or social problems. No, the text calls for us to courageously lay the groundwork day by day for a trajectory that spans 500, 1,000, or even 3,000 years into the future. The ultimate goal is to set a definitive direction right now that ensures the long-term survival, spiritual elevation, and true happiness of billions of humans across millennia.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a vital question drawn straight from the text to reflect on. How will you avoid being swayed by modern common sense, and what spiritual groundwork will you lay today? It's a really profound challenge. It asks us to look beyond our immediate material needs and seriously consider our lasting legacy for the generations to come. Thanks for joining me as we explored these deeply thought-provoking concepts. Catch you next time.